We are here with Jesus. Jesus, tell us more of your stories.
Peace be with you. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Let us go to today's parable. Two brothers worked under the same sun, tending vineyards their father had left them. Samuel, the elder, owned the larger land on the hillside. David, the younger, received the smaller plot in the valley below. On the first harvest, Samuel's baskets overflowed with clusters of deep purple grapes. The juice ran down his arms as he laughed with his workers. David watched from his vineyard. His own harvest was good, his baskets full, his grapes sweet, but his eyes kept drifting upward to his brother's land. Why does he have more? David whispered to himself as he counted his baskets. 20 baskets. Good, honest work. But Samuel had 35. His wife touched his shoulder. David, we have enough. Look how blessed we are. He pulled away. Blessed? You call this blessed when my brother has almost double? The next morning, David climbed the hill before dawn. He hid behind the stone wall separating their lands and watched Samuel prune his vines, each cut deliberate, each branch chosen with care. David took notes, thinking he could learn the secret to Samuel's abundance. But when David returned to his own vineyard, he barely saw his vines. He saw only the comparison. His grapes looked smaller now, darker, but were they as sweet? His workers seemed slower. Were they lazy? Was he cursed while Samuel was favored? My brother and I started with the same hands, David told his friend one evening. The same father, the same training. Why does God smile on him and not on me? His friend shook his head. David, your vineyard produces more than enough. Enough? David's voice rose. Enough is not equal. Enough is not fair. The weeks passed. David stopped pruning at the right time. He was too busy watching Samuel's workers move through the rows with their sharp shears, their laughter floating down the hillside like mockery, and he stopped irrigating on the critical days. Why should he water when Samuel's grapes seemed to grow fat without effort? David convinced himself his brother had better soil, better luck, better favor from heaven. And when the beetles came, small and brown and hungry, David didn't notice them on his leaves. He was standing at the boundary wall again, watching Samuel inspect his own vines, touching each cluster with gentleness, speaking to his workers with kindness. Look at him, David muttered, acting like he earned it, acting like he's better. His wife found him there as the sun set. David, the beetles are eating the new growth. Please come back. Help me save what we have. He waved her off. Let them eat. Nothing I do matters anyway. He gets everything and I get scraps. But they weren't scraps. Even neglected, David's vineyard still produced. The vines, planted in rich valley soil, still pushed out grapes. Not as many as before, but enough to fill 15 baskets. Enough to feed his family. Enough to sell at market. David saw only failure. He counted 15 baskets and thought of Samuel's 35. The number poisoned every grape. Then one evening, dark clouds rolled over the hills. The wind picked up, cold and violent. David stood in his doorway and looked up at Samuel's vineyard on the exposed hillside. A storm, he said softly. A smile crept across his face. Finally, he'll lose something. The storm hit with fury. Hail the size of figs fell from the sky. The sound was like 1,000 drums beating the earth. David stayed inside, but through his window, he watched the destruction. Lightning illuminated Samuel's hillside vineyard. The hail shredded the leaves. The wind ripped vines from their posts. The devastation was total. When dawn broke, the storm had passed. David's vineyard in the valley had been protected by the surrounding hills, barely touched. But Samuel's was destroyed. David climbed the hill with quick steps. He told himself he was going to comfort his brother, but in his heart, something dark celebrated. Finally, they were equal. No, better than equal. Now David had more. He found Samuel on his knees among the ruins. Torn vines lay in muddy heaps. Broken posts jutted from the ground like broken bones. Not a single grape remained. The entire harvest, gone. A year's work, obliterated in one night. David opened his mouth to speak, to offer false sympathy wrapped in hidden joy. But Samuel looked up with tears streaming down his face, and he said, "Thank you, God. Thank you." David froze. "What?" Samuel stood, his hands covered in mud, his face full of peace. I lost the grapes, but I still have my wife. I still have my children. I still have my health. He looked at David. And I still have my brother. He embraced David, and David stood rigid in his arms, his mind spinning. Don't you see? Samuel whispered. These were just grapes. But you are my blood, my family. That I didn't lose. Something cracked inside David's chest. He pulled away and turned to look back down at his own vineyard in the valley, his vineyard that had been spared, his vines that still held grapes, but the vines were empty. He ran down the hill, stumbling, his heart pounding. When he reached his vineyard, he fell to his knees. The birds had come. While he had been up the hill, while he had been watching Samuel's destruction with secret joy, the birds had stripped every last grape from his vines. Not one remained. His wife stood at the edge of the vineyard, weeping. I tried to chase them away, David, I tried. But you weren't here, you were up there. David looked at his hands. Empty. He looked at his baskets. Empty. He looked at his heart. Empty. While Samuel had lost everything to the storm and still had gratitude, David had been spared by the storm and still had nothing. Because the storm outside hadn't destroyed his harvest. The storm inside had. The envy had eaten his grapes long before the birds arrived. It had rotted them from the inside. Every moment he spent counting his brother's blessings was a moment he abandoned his own. Every hour he spent watching Samuel's joy was an hour his own vineyard went untended. He had 20 baskets at the beginning, then 15, then none. Not because of drought or disease or bad soil, because of the poison he chose to drink while hoping his brother would die of thirst. David looked up at the hill where Samuel stood among his ruins, still grateful, still at peace, still rich in the ways that mattered. And David understood. He had lost everything, not when the birds came, but the first moment he said, "Why does he have more? Do you see it now? How many blessings rot in your hands while you count someone else's? How many of your own grapes fall to the ground while you climb walls to peer into another's harvest?" Envy doesn't just steal your joy. It destroys the very gifts already placed in your hands. The moment you start measuring your life against another's, you stop living your own. You stop tending your own vineyard. And the birds come. They always come. Not to take what you have, but to take what you've already abandoned through comparison. Samuel lost his grapes but kept his peace. David kept his vines but lost everything because he was never present to protect them. His body stood in his vineyard, but his heart lived on the other side of the wall. Where is your heart right now? In your own life, tending your own blessings, or pressed against a wall, counting what someone else has, turning your gifts into grief through the poison of comparison? And in the Holy Scriptures it is written in Proverbs chapter 14 verse 30, "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones."